Let me shoot straight with you. Most relationships don't fail because of money, stress, or even infidelity. They fail because two people stop talking in a way that actually connects. They start talking at each other instead of with each other. And when communication breaks down, trust and intimacy follow right behind it. Here's the truth: you can't build a strong relationship on weak communication. If you don't learn how to speak honestly, listen actively, and handle conflict without turning it into a war zone, then your relationship is a house built on sand. It will collapse. I don't care how much you love each other, love without communication will starve to death. And here's the part people don't like hearing: you are responsible for how you show up in every conversation. If your go-to-move is shutting down, snapping back, or turning everything into a blame game, that's not a communication style, that's a relationship grenade. Clarity beats assumption every time, because when it comes to relationships, guessing games destroy trust. One of the most common mistakes people make is believing that their partner should just know what they're feeling, what they want, or what they mean. That's not love, that's laziness. Nobody, no matter how close they are to you, can crawl inside your head and decode your thoughts. When you rely on assumptions instead of clarity, you set your relationship up for constant misfires. A simple misunderstanding can turn into a full-blown fight because what you meant and what your partner heard are two entirely different things. Think about how many arguments could be avoided if both people simply took the time to say what they actually meant instead of dropping hints, making sarcastic remarks, or staying silent while expecting the other person to connect invisible dots. Clarity is not just about what you say, it's about how you say it. Communication is a skill, and like any skill, it requires effort and practice. When you communicate clearly, you remove the room for misinterpretation. You stop leaving your partner in a fog of uncertainty. You stop expecting them to figure out the puzzle of your emotions. For example, if you're upset that your partner is late, don't give them the cold shoulder or throw out a vague, "I'm fine." That doesn't communicate anything except frustration, and it forces the other person to either walk on eggshells or start defending themselves against something they don't fully understand. Instead, you could say, "When you're late, it makes me feel like my time isn't valued. I'd appreciate it if you give me a heads up next time." That's clarity. That's communication that leads to change. Assumptions, on the other hand, are relationship poison. You assume your partner doesn't care because they didn't text you back right away. You assume they're ignoring you when really they're just busy. You assume their tone means they're angry when maybe they're just tired. Each assumption adds another brick in a wall of resentment. Over time, you start treating your partner based on the story in your head instead of the truth of the situation. And once you start living in that story, everything they do gets filtered through suspicion and negativity. Clarity cuts through that fog because it forces you to check in, to ask instead of assume, and to express instead of expecting mind reading. Another dimension of clarity is being direct about what you want in the relationship. Too many people play the guessing game when it comes to needs and expectations. They think, if they loved me, they would know what I need. That's nonsense. Love doesn't give anyone psychic powers. If you need more affection, say it. If you need more space, say it. If you want help with responsibilities, say it. By being direct, you give your partner the opportunity to actually show up for you instead of leaving them in the dark. The couples who thrive long-term are the ones who eliminate the guesswork and communicate their needs clearly. Clarity also demands honesty. You can't water down your truth and then complain when your partner doesn't understand you. If something is bothering you, speak up respectfully but firmly. If you're happy about something, express it clearly too. A lot of people only use clarity when they're upset, but clarity is just as important in positive communication. Saying, "I appreciate the way you handled that situation," or "It means a lot to me when you support me like that," is a clear affirmation that strengthens the relationship. It leaves no doubt about how you feel and why you value your partner. Now, clarity doesn't mean being blunt to the point of cruelty. It's not about tearing someone down with brutal honesty. It's about taking responsibility for making your words easy to understand without hidden meanings, manipulations, or mixed signals. It means speaking in a way that your partner can actually receive instead of forcing them to decode your emotions. For example, sarcasm is the enemy of clarity. Saying one thing while meaning another leaves your partner confused and often defensive. It's much more effective to speak plainly, "I feel hurt," "I feel unappreciated," or "I feel grateful." Those statements cannot be misunderstood. The payoff of practicing clarity is huge. It builds trust because your partner knows where they stand with you. They don't have to worry about reading between the lines or guessing. If you're secretly upset, it creates emotional safety because both people know they can count on honesty without hidden agendas. And it strengthens problem solving because clarity brings issues into the open instead of letting them fester under layers of assumptions. But let me be clear about something else: clarity requires courage. It's easy to stay vague because vagueness protects you from rejection. If you don't spell out what you want, you can't be disappointed when you don't get it. But that's just self-protection disguised as communication. Courageous communication means putting your needs, your feelings, and your truth on the table, even if it feels uncomfortable. And when both people commit to clarity, the relationship becomes a partnership built on truth instead of guesswork. At the end of the day, clarity is respect. It respects your partner enough to tell them the truth. It respects yourself enough to express your needs. And it respects the relationship enough to cut out the drama of mind, reading, and assumptions. If you want a strong connection, you have to make clarity your default setting. Because in relationships, clarity isn't optional. It's the difference between building trust or building walls. Listening is more powerful than talking because it is the foundation of true connection. Most people go into conversations focused on what they want to say, how they want to be heard, and what point they want to get across. But here's the truth: communication is not a speech contest. It's an exchange of understanding. You can talk all day long, but if you're not listening to your partner, really listening, then you're not connecting, you're just making noise. Relationships thrive not because both people talk more, but because both people feel heard and understood. That's the real currency of intimacy. The problem is that most people mistake hearing for listening. Hearing is passive. You catch the words but don't absorb the meaning. Listening is active. It means tuning in, setting aside your defenses, and being fully present. If your partner is telling you how they feel and you're already crafting your rebuttal in your head, you're not listening, you're preparing to win. And relationships are not won, they're nurtured. Every time you choose to listen instead of loading your next argument, you send a powerful message. I value what you have to say. Your feelings matter to me. That alone can disarm tension and open the door to healthier communication. Listening is also powerful because it validates emotions. Most people don't actually want someone to fix their problems right away. They want to know that their feelings are seen, respected, and taken seriously. Think about the last time you were upset. What mattered more? Someone jumping in with a quick solution or someone saying, "I get it, that must feel really tough." Validation doesn't mean you agree with everything your partner says. It means you acknowledge their experience. That acknowledgement often diffuses more conflict than any clever comeback or long explanation ever could. Another aspect of listening is that it gives you access to information you would otherwise miss. When you truly listen, you learn things about your partner's fears, desires, boundaries, and needs that you'd never know if you were always the one talking. You gain insight into their world, and that insight helps you respond with empathy instead of assumption. Many relationships crumble because one or both partners stop paying attention. They think they already know everything about each other. But people evolve, and if you don't keep listening, you'll wake up one day and realize you're living with a stranger. Listening also builds trust. When your partner knows they can come to you and be heard without being judged, interrupted, or dismissed, they'll open up more. And with every conversation where listening is practiced, the bond gets stronger. On the flip side, when someone feels ignored, they eventually stop talking altogether. Silence in a relationship is often not peace, it's resignation. It's one or both people giving up on being heard. That silence creates distance, and distance destroys closeness. So listening isn't just a skill, it's a safeguard against the erosion of intimacy. The act of listening requires intentional behavior. That means putting down your phone, making eye contact, and resisting the urge to multitask while your partner speaks. It means asking clarifying questions instead of jumping to conclusions. It means reflecting back what you heard, like saying, "So what I'm hearing is that you felt overwhelmed when I didn't step in to help. Is that right?" That single habit, checking for understanding, can prevent countless arguments because it ensures you're addressing the real issue, not a distorted version of it. But let's be honest, listening is not easy. It takes patience to sit with someone else's feelings when you want to defend yourself. It takes humility to admit that their perspective matters just as much as yours. It takes discipline to bite your tongue when you're itching to interrupt. Many people avoid true listening because it requires vulnerability. When you stop talking and start listening, you surrender control. You let the other person's reality into the space, and that can be uncomfortable. But that discomfort is exactly where growth and connection happen. Another reason listening is more powerful than talking is that it transforms conflict into collaboration. Arguments often spiral because both people are more concerned with being right than being understood. But when one person chooses to listen first, the dynamic shifts. Suddenly, the argument stops being about two opposing sides and starts being about solving the problem together. By saying, "I want to hear you out before I respond," you take the heat out of the fight, you move from competition to cooperation. Listening also communicates love in a way that words often can't. Think about it. When someone gives you their full attention, it makes you feel valued, important, and prioritized. It tells you that you matter more than the distractions around them. In a world full of noise, giving someone the gift of your undivided attention is one of the purest acts of love you can offer. At the end of the day, talking may get your point across, but listening gets your relationship across the finish line. Words may fill the air, but listening fills the heart. When you listen, you create space for understanding. When you listen, you create a safe environment where both people can be real. And when you listen, you create the foundation for a relationship that can weather conflict, change, and time. Talking is important, but listening is transformative. That's why in healthy relationships, listening is not just more powerful than talking, it's the lifeline that keeps everything else alive. Tone sets the temperature because the way you say something can completely change how it is received. You can speak the truth, but if your tone comes across as harsh, sarcastic, or dismissive, the message gets lost in the delivery. People often underestimate this, but in relationships, tone is the thermostat. It sets the emotional climate of the conversation. If your tone is calm and respectful, you create an atmosphere where understanding can grow. If your tone is sharp or hostile, you instantly trigger defensiveness, and no matter how valid your point might be, your partner stops hearing it. They stop focusing on the content and start reacting to the attitude behind it. Think about it this way. Tone is the difference between someone saying, "Can we talk about this?" with sincerity versus, "Oh, so now you want to talk?" with sarcasm. Same words, completely different impact. The first invites dialogue, the second shuts it down. That's how powerful tone is. It can either open the door to resolution or slam it shut before the conversation even begins. A lot of people defend themselves by saying, "Well, that's not what I meant," but in communication, intent does not erase impact. Your partner doesn't just hear your words, they feel your tone. When your tone is aggressive, even if your words are neutral, it communicates disrespect. When your tone is dismissive, even if your words sound polite, it communicates indifference. In relationships, perception is reality. If your partner feels disrespected, it doesn't matter if you didn't intend it that way. The damage is already done. Tone also has the power to escalate or de-escalate conflict. When tempers flare, it's usually not the issue itself that explodes the situation, but the tone people take while addressing it. A raised voice, a sarcastic remark, or condescending sigh can turn a minor disagreement into battle. On the other hand, a steady voice, calm pacing, and respectful delivery can keep even heated issues manageable. The key is recognizing that in those moments, your tone can either be gasoline or water on the fire. And every time you choose the wrong tone, you make the problem harder to solve. Another reason tone sets the temperature is because it communicates your emotional state more loudly than your actual words. For example, you might say, "I'm fine," but if your tone is clipped and cold, your partner instantly knows you're not. That creates confusion because the words and the tone don't match. Mixed signals like this breed mistrust over time. Your partner starts to feel like they can't rely on what you say because your tone is telling a different story. Clear, honest communication requires alignment between your words and your tone so that the message is consistent. Tone also carries weight in positive communication. A warm tone of voice can make simple words like "thank you" or "I appreciate you" land with 10 times more impact. On the other hand, a flat or distracted tone can make even a compliment feel empty. It's not just about what you say to your partner, it's how you make them feel while you say it. Your tone has the power to build intimacy, create safety, and reinforce love, or it can chip away at trust and closeness if it consistently comes across as negative. The tricky part is that tone often comes from habit. You may not even notice the edge in your voice because you've used it for years. Maybe sarcasm has been your default coping tool, or maybe you raise your voice without realizing it because that's what you saw growing up. But here's the accountability piece. Your habits don't excuse the impact they have on your partner. If your tone is hurting the relationship, it's your responsibility to own it and change it. Awareness is the first step. Pay attention to how your partner reacts to your tone. If they get defensive or shut down, that's feedback that your delivery needs adjusting. One effective practice is self-regulation before speaking. Check your emotional state. If you're frustrated or angry, your tone will reflect that even if your words are measured. Sometimes the best thing you can do is take a pause, breathe, and reset your tone before continuing the conversation. This is not about being fake, it's about being intentional. You're choosing to communicate in a way that keeps the emotional temperature at a level where real dialogue can happen. Tone also reflects respect. A respectful tone communicates that even when you disagree, you still value the person you're speaking to. Disrespectful tone, on the other hand, communicates superiority, contempt, or apathy. Relationships cannot thrive in an atmosphere of contempt. If your tone consistently conveys that you see yourself as above your partner or that their feelings don't matter, the relationship will slowly erode, no matter how much love is in the background. At its core, managing tone is about accountability. You can't control how your partner reacts, but you can control the temperature you set when you speak. You can choose to speak with warmth, patience, and respect, or you can choose to speak with sarcasm, anger, and blame. One option builds bridges, the other builds walls. If you want to be heard, don't just focus on your words. Pay attention to the music you're playing underneath them. Tone is like the soundtrack to your relationship. If it's harsh, negative, or condescending, it creates an atmosphere of tension and distance. If it's gentle, respectful, and sincere, it creates a climate of safety and closeness. Every conversation is an opportunity to set the temperature. The question is, are you creating an environment where love can grow, or are you making the room too cold or too hot for real connection to survive? Conflict handled right builds intimacy because disagreements are not the enemy of relationships. Avoidance and destruction are. Too many people believe that if they argue, it means their relationship is broken. The truth is, conflict is inevitable whenever two people with their own personalities, histories, and perspectives come together. What determines the strength of the relationship is not the absence of conflict, but the way it is managed. Handled poorly, conflict erodes trust, creates resentment, and widens the gap between partners. Handled well, conflict actually deepens understanding, builds respect, and strengthens the bond. Think about it, every disagreement is an opportunity to learn something new about your partner. Maybe you discover what triggers their insecurities, what values they hold most dearly, or what needs they've been too afraid to avoid. Without conflict, those truths often stay hidden. When you navigate disagreements with respect and patience, you uncover layers of each other that you wouldn't otherwise see. That process of discovery is what creates intimacy, the sense that you know and understand your partner on a deeper level. Conflict also tests the foundation of trust. If you and your partner can face a tough conversation without tearing each other down, it sends a powerful signal. This relationship is strong enough to hold both our truths. That kind of trust is not built when everything is smooth. It's forged in the fire of challenges. When you both know that you can fight fairly, disagree honestly, and still come out united, you build confidence in the relationship's durability. You stop fearing conflict and start seeing it as part of the growth process. The problem is that most people were never taught how to handle conflict constructively. They either avoid it altogether, which creates silent resentment, or they dive into it like a battlefield where the only goal is to win. Avoidance leads to distance because unspoken issues don't disappear, they simmer. Over time, that unspoken tension leaks into every interaction, creating passive-aggressive behaviors or emotional withdrawal. On the other hand, treating conflict like a war turns your partner into an opponent instead of an ally. Winning the fight may give you temporary satisfaction, but it leaves your partner feeling defeated, disrespected, and disconnected. Neither avoidance nor aggression builds intimacy. Both destroy it. Handling conflict right starts with shifting the goal. The goal is not victory. The goal is resolution and understanding. It's not about proving who's right, but about finding common ground that strengthens the relationship. That shift requires both people to check their egos at the door and remember that they're on the same team. When you stop asking, how do I win this, and start asking, how do we solve this together, the entire dynamic changes. Conflict becomes collaboration instead of combat. Respect is the cornerstone of healthy conflict. Even when emotions are high, respecting your partner's dignity keeps the conversation safe. That means no name calling, no character assassinations, and no weaponizing past mistakes. Those tactics might feel powerful in the moment, but they poison the relationship long term. Respectful conflict focuses on the issue, not the person. For example, saying, I felt unsupported when you didn't show up, addresses a behavior, while saying, you're selfish and never care attacks identity. The first opens the door to change, the second slams it shut. Another part of handling conflict well is listening. Even when you feel attacked, it takes discipline to pause your defenses and ask, what is my partner really trying to tell me? Many times, anger is just a mask for hurt, fear, or unmet needs. If you can listen beneath the surface and validate the feelings driving the frustration, you can de-escalate the argument and get to the heart of the matter. That doesn't mean agreeing with everything your partner says, but it does mean acknowledging that their emotions are real and important. That acknowledgement is what transforms conflict into intimacy because it says, even when we clash, I still see and value you. Healthy conflict also requires accountability. Both partners must be willing to own their part instead of pointing fingers endlessly. Nothing builds intimacy faster than hearing your partner say, you're right, I could have handled that better. I'm sorry. That humility takes the sting out of conflict and turns it into a moment of connection. When apologies are sincere and followed by changed behavior, they become powerful building blocks for trust. Repair after conflict is just as important as the conflict itself. How you close the conversation determines whether it creates closeness or distance. Ending with clarity about what you've agreed to reassurance of love, and even a simple gesture like a hug or kind word signals that the relationship is still intact. Those repair moments are like sealing a wound so it heals instead of festers. Over time, those cycles of conflict and repair create a rhythm of resilience. The relationship proves to both partners that it can survive storms and come out stronger. Conflict handled right builds intimacy because it turns tension into teaching, differences into discovery, and pain into progress. Every time you face an argument and come through it with greater understanding, you strengthen the emotional bond. You stop being two people avoiding problems and start being two partners tackling life together. That's real intimacy, not just the easy moments, but the ability to be raw, vulnerable, and imperfect without fear that the relationship will collapse. At the end of the day, conflict is not a sign of failure. It's a sign that two people are engaged enough to care about the outcome. The real failure is when conflict is either avoided or weaponized. If you can learn to face it with respect, empathy, accountability, and a shared commitment to resolution, conflict becomes the forge that makes your relationship unbreakable. Intimacy doesn't just happen in the calm, it's built in the storm when two people choose each other even while disagreeing. That choice, made over and over again, is what creates lasting closeness.